It's time for another episode of The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt. I'm a messenger with United Network News, and we are the news division of United Network. And our mission is to bring you the real news. So throughout our network, we release a lot of content throughout the week. That includes in-depth news coverage, including local stories told through the eyes of our field messengers, restoration news as we create our beautiful new Earth, and updates from the Global Intelligence Agency of what's really happening here on our planet in the ultimate battle, really, of good versus evil. So if that's new to you, welcome. Welcome to UNN. We talk about that kind of stuff all the time. It sounds a little bit melodramatic, doesn't it? But it's absolutely true. You are seeing things play out now that are very unique. And it's why there's this weird sense of what in the world is really happening on our planet. There's so many people that kind of have a sixth sense about them, and they know something's wrong. They know things are off. You know, our economies are off. Politics is insane. You know, health, what's with these pandemics and so what is going on here? But it's really hard to pinpoint sometimes. But that is because we are in the final stages of this throw. And the light side is already won, which is a beautiful thing. But someone forgot to tell the so-called deep state. So we still have some things that we're muddling through with humans that don't care for humanity too much. We also have some things that are more esoteric that are going on because the powers that used to control this planet thought we might, there might be a chance that we get to this point someday. And there's kind of like dead man switches and stuff going on. So it's weird. One day you'll feel fine. The next day you feel like you got a 24-hour flu. I don't know if that's been going on with you guys, but man, my health has been all over the place. That's not usually what happens with me. So, we're working our way through it. But the good news is that we know how this turns out, right? And the light has already won. And we collectively have decided that. Even the so-called bad guys, we're all one, and yeah, that's probably not what they want to hear right now. They're pretty upset about various things. We will get to that when we talk about the Global Intelligence Agency and we hear from Kim Gogan, who I've got a couple sound bites I'm going to play for you later on. All right. If you're listening to this podcast and if you're brand new, well, this podcast is basically a week in review. So I'm going to go over some of the stories that we released over the last week. I want to get you guys caught up. If you listen on a regular basis and you happen to miss some stuff, this is a great way to catch up on anything you may have missed. Or if you want to share UNN with someone else, obviously podcasts are free, so this is a great way for them to hear firsthand some of the stories that we talk about. You guys are more than welcome, if you're not already, to become a member of United Network and get access to all the content immediately as we put it out. If you want more information on that, you can go to our website at unitednetwork.earth. We also release our news updates, and I believe the GIA reports as well. All of that goes out about a week after it's released exclusively to our members. So if you can wait a week, that's another way. Now, we can't guarantee that it will stay up there, right? Because there are certain things that we can't control, like the minds of the people at YouTube and even Rumble. So we'll see where that goes. But we do put it up a week after. So that's another great way for you guys to see what's going on at UNN. With anything that we talk about, we always encourage you guys to think critically and to ask questions, do more research, dig a little bit. And if you like what you hear here at UNN, then share what you've learned with other people. This is how we grow. This is how we learn. This is how we have, for so long, they've kept us separate from each other. We can't even have a civil conversation about politics nowadays, which is crazy. We should be able to talk to each other, and it's going to start with us. So when you learn something new, just share it with someone else. Okay, let's get going, guys. No announcements today, so let's just dive into this. Here are the rundown of stories you may have missed this week on UNN. All right, let's kick things off with our field messenger reports. Field messengers are what United Network News is all about. It's about real people telling us what's going on in your community because like I said earlier, we have become separated from each other. And the stories that we hear on mainstream and alternative media usually have some agenda behind them. We think the best way to eliminate that agenda is just to start talking to each other. And that's what our field messengers do. When things happen in their area, and I just got a stat the other day because I asked for it because I was updating the media kit. And I think we have had field messengers in 76 countries since we started doing our regular news updates almost 3 years ago. I don't know, 2.5 years ago, something like that, which is incredible. I mean, we hope to have tons of field messengers in every single country. So if that's you, if you're thinking about joining our team and there's no real requirements. You just, send us your footage when something interesting is happening in your area. We've got a great production team that can put everything together, and then we release it as a report on our news. It's that simple. If you're interested in learning more, you can go to our website and just look under Field Messengers. We've got lots of information. In fact, there's a Telegram group where you can ask questions. I believe we're having meetings. It's supposed to be every week. I'm not sure if it's every Friday, I wanted to say. Anyways, join the groups, but there are like Zoom calls so that you can meet other people and just learn more about what we're trying to do. Let's talk about our field messenger reports from this week. So Amy from New Jersey, which of course is a state in the United States, does a report on gun safety. Now, whether you are a fan of guns or not a fan of guns, there's no judgment here. But if you are going to have guns, it just makes sense that you understand how to use them safely. That makes sense, right? You need to be safe with whatever you're doing. And that's exactly what Amy does in this video. And it's really helpful. Whether you are a fan of guns or not, we all want everyone to be safe. And so you guys can check out that report if you want to know a little bit more about gun safety. That was on Monday. Also on Monday, Elsabe from New Zealand, she interviews, or rather she lets someone talk. His name is Mark Quinn. He is leading a movement to form self-supporting groups in New Zealand that empower people to return decision-making back to their community. Because what's happening is the councils there, which are overseen by government, which we know all government is corrupt, it's becoming a problem. They're not listening. Money has gone missing. It's a little crazy. And so he's teaching people how to stand up in an appropriate way and start to lead themselves, which is something that all of humanity has to learn to do, not just New Zealanders. So it's a great lesson to teach, and it was very interesting to hear from Mark Quinn. All right, also on Monday, Diane from Uganda shares a power outage that happened in the area, actually, I believe in eastern Uganda. There are regular power outages that leave communities without power, sometimes for extended periods of time, which isn't very fun. So during one of these outages, Diane goes out and talks to the people that are working on the tower. What are you doing? What's the process for, helping out in a situation like this? And I think with this outage, it lasted more than 36 hours, which I don't know. Here in the U.S., if you have an outage that's more than a couple hours, everyone starts to freak out. So I can only imagine after 36. So Diane, thank you for that report. All right, on Wednesday, we had a few stories. Irene from New York, specifically in the Staten Island area, she talks about how wetlands in Staten Island are decreasing. She talks with someone who knows a lot about this, that's monitoring this. This is endangering the local ecosystem and way of life for the people, also for obviously the animals, the microorganisms, everything that's part of the biodiversity in the area. And yeah, like I said, she talks with a local advocate about the issue. And, they discuss some endangered species. I believe they said there was a turtle and a frog that's now endangered as a result. And this does cost the area a lot of money. If it is destroyed, they estimated around $500,000, but that was a very conservative estimate. And, that's not just a one-time fee. A lot of people and a lot of things lose out when ecosystems are destroyed. So we want to recognize this in advance and help to make sure that that doesn't happen. All right, Emma from Spain talks about solar hotels. This is becoming very popular in Fuerteventura, Spain, because of all the tourism, right? So it's popular for hotels and various resorts. And here's something I didn't know. So they are very close to the equator. And as a result, it makes sense for solar specifically to be prominent in the area, right? Can give them, a lot of power because of all the sun in the area. So she showed us kind of like, she was like looking out over the whole town, right? And you could see all these solar panels on the different roofs. They also had some windmills, like the newer kind, right? Windmills to run, I believe she said, the water plant. So they're thinking sustainably. I know there are some issues, with solar, also with wind as far as being able to recycle this stuff, but it is thinking a little bit outside of the box, right? And we want to have solutions that are, not just good for our pocketbooks, but also good for the planet. All right, Susan out of Sweden. We are able to trek along with Susan as she goes mushroom picking. So I love mushrooms. I always tell my girls, I'm like, why don't you like mushrooms? It like breaks my heart. So she goes foraging, Susan. She goes foraging in Sweden in a forest. She explores, she collects, and then she cooks these wild mushrooms. Now, disclaimer here, don't just go picking any kind of mushrooms. You have to be careful. Susan says only pick the ones that you know. And she says sometimes when you find one, there's a lot. You may have to go digging a little bit, turn up some leaves. But she found a bunch of mushrooms, and then she showed us how she prepares her mushrooms. I should make my girls watch the video. I don't know why it's important for them to like mushrooms. I think it's because I like them so much. All right, Alicia out of England tells us about the silver swans. Now, this is not an animal. The silver swans is a program by the Royal Academy of Dance, and it enables seniors to enjoy dance taught by professionals. And it's very successful. I guess they were actually featured on the UK morning news on a television show, which is pretty cool. So, Alicia, we actually are able to hear from the teacher in the class as well as at least one of the dancers, which I thought was really interesting because they talk about how they used to dance when they were younger and how this has amazing benefits for them. But it's also kind of a trip down memory lane, right? And I can resonate with that. I danced a lot when I was younger, and I could kind of see myself in these older women. I was like, yep, that would probably be me, a good 20, 30 years from now. There I am. But there's a lot of benefits to dance. And these women are, learning that firsthand. Things like balance, mobility. It increases your memory because you have to remember the steps. And then there's a social element to it where you can, hang out with other women and just share a common love for dance. Okay, let's continue on the theme of dance with Kathleen, who is doing a report out of Tennessee, another state in the U.S., and she's actually in Summertown, where people gather to celebrate the power of dance and music as a universal language. So this was really interesting. This featured simple dances and chants, people of all ages, and they were doing this in unison. It was all about feeling peace and joy. Apparently, it was a 3-day gathering that they had. I wish we had more of this, especially in Western cultures. We don't, it's not cool for, let's say, men usually to just get out there and dance or just kind of vibe with the music or whatever. It's not really popular here. I hope we see a return of this because I think there's incredible things that happen when you just let yourself go and feel these positive emotions. So that's wishful thinking on my part. Shanti from Amsterdam takes us to the Jewel of the Land Festival. This is an annual event held at an enchanting village in Amsterdam. And so this was actually their 50th celebration. There was drums, dance, and music. She says this is kind of the grandmother for a lot of other festivals. So obviously this became popular, and then there were spinoffs and things like that happened. It is an international event. Many cultures come to celebrate life and love. Lots of indigenous people. I love this one woman. She didn't actually interview her. She was just capturing something that this one woman was saying. So she was from an indigenous tribe. And I can't remember exactly what she said, but it was something like, welcome, we've been waiting for you guys. Because the indigenous people have always been so connected to their land. And now a lot of us are kind of waking up going, oh my gosh, we have missed out on so much because we're not connected with our planet. We're not connected with the other organic living things around us. So I just thought it was really pretty that she's just like, welcome, we've been expecting you. All right, here's a look at some of our in-depth news stories that we researched for you guys and released this week. Let's talk about the Federal Trade Commission's click to cancel rule. Okay, so this is a rule based in the U.S. The aim is to simplify the cancellation process for subscription-based services. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but a lot of them have become increasingly complex and very frustrating for consumers. So this rule targets businesses that use, this is kind of like the phrase, negative option features. And what that means is consumers are typically charged for services unless they actively cancel. So it's on you. You're not necessarily going to be notified or anything like that. But if you don't cancel, then they have the opportunity to renew and to charge you. So often there are not clear notifications, nor is it easy. I have heard of people having to travel to another state. For example, like let's say you got a gym membership or something like that, and you're no longer in the state and you want to cancel, they make you go in person. Like this kind of stuff is crazy, right?
Well, if you're like me, I wonder if you've ever been caught up in a situation where you subscribed to something, but then when you didn't need it or want it anymore, you couldn't cancel. You couldn't find a telephone call, or you got stuck on a website, screen after screen trying to cancel it. The Federal Trade Commission says it receives thousands of complaints from consumers every year in the same situation. They have a subscription that they can't cancel, or they tried to cancel it and the monthly charges continued even after they tried to quit that subscription. Well, they have a solution. The Federal Trade Commission has a proposed click to cancel that'll make it easier to get out of those pesky, plaguing monthly charges that you don't want anymore.
So this is a win for consumers, but don't celebrate yet because many large corporations, including Amazon, Netflix, and Comcast, are opposing this rule because they're the ones benefiting from all these extra charges. But they're citing concerns over its impact on their business model. So again, that's a nice way to say we're going to lose a lot of money if you guys, aren't automatically charged. If the rule survives legal challenges, because again, there are some challenges and nothing can move forward until these are settled, businesses would have until mid-April to comply with significant penalties for violations. So we will be following this story for you guys. Let's talk about going on vacation because this may sound like, oh, duh. But so many of us, especially in the West, and I would even say especially in the United States, we just don't take advantage of our vacation. It's like if you go on vacation, it's a bad thing or you're not a good worker or whatever. The truth is, if you want to look at this from a health standpoint, vacation days are essential for your mental and physical well-being. It offers a break from the stresses of daily life. It provides an opportunity to recharge. But, vacation policies will differ greatly around the world. There's many European countries offering at least 4 weeks of paid leave, which sounds amazing. The United States definitely lags behind, offering fewer days with no federal requirement for paid vacation. Did you know that? So in the U.S., there is no federal requirement to offer your employees paid vacation. Despite the benefits of taking time off, many workers, especially in the U.S., struggle to take their full vacation due to workload pressures or saving days for emergencies.
My name is Dr. Erin Engel. I'm a clinical psychologist within Columbia's Department of Psychiatry. It's really important that people take vacation. What we don't realize is that stress accumulates over time, and it becomes difficult to manage the most routine tasks and challenges. Vacation basically means a break from our day-to-day routines. For example, doing something like, say, going to the art museum or catching a movie, or even something that's more restorative like a massage. If you live in the city, making sure you get to a local park could be a wonderful way to get outside, to expand awareness, to leave our thoughts at work, giving yourself the permission to just be. And that's something that we rarely take the time to do. It doesn't have to be expensive, but ultimately the benefits are that we feel restored, we feel better able to come back to our day-to-day with a more creative outlook and mindset.
All right, so there you go. You all have permission from Sunny to take a vacation. Just tell your employer, I'm trying to prevent burnout. But you think that they would want that, right? So for those with limited budgets, daycations or staycations, which are short breaks at local destinations or even staying at home, offer an affordable way to recharge. Ultimately, taking time off is an investment in both health and productivity. All right, so there has been a rapid decline in biodiversity, which obviously, and I'm talking about worldwide here, that threatens ecosystems, economies. This was the central topic at the UN's CBD COP16 meeting in Cali, Colombia. Nations discussed various strategies to address biodiversity loss, including the creation of the Cali Fund. Now, this is a new mechanism where companies using genetic resources like pharmaceuticals would contribute a percentage of profits to support indigenous communities. Additionally, a permanent advisory body for indigenous peoples was established to ensure their voices are heard in future biodiversity discussions. However, there were key issues such as a broader biodiversity fund and tracking progress on the whole framework. All of that remained unresolved. So they couldn't come up with very many conclusions. So A for effort, guys, but we need to come back to the table and make some decisions here for sure. Earthen homes. You guys know what that is? So these are homes that are constructed from natural materials like clay, sand, and straw. They are eco-friendly, and we did a report just to update everyone on how cool they are and how they can help the environment. Not for everybody, though, but they can be very cost-effective. They've been used for thousands of years, so this is not a brand new thing, right? But we're trying to bring this back as much as possible. These homes offer excellent insulation, breathability, and durability, making them ideal for various climates. While earthen homes were once the go-to building material for ancient civilizations, modern construction materials like concrete and steel have largely replaced them due to industrialization and urbanization. Listen to this.
There's increasing evidence that modern buildings compromise our psychological and emotional health as well as our physical well-being. As we've noted, right angles and flat surfaces that are all in one color and constant uniformity don't exist in the natural world which our ancestors evolved. These traits may trigger a subconscious reaction that tells us there's something wrong here, keeping us nervous and stressed. Most modern homes don't successfully stimulate our senses with the variety of patterns, shapes, textures, smells, and sounds that our pre-industrial ancestors experienced. The monotony of our built environments probably contributes to our addiction to sensory stimulation through drugs and electronic media. From Toronto to Tapatula in Australia and Algeria, almost every individual we have met who lives in Earth, even though modern day people are conditioned to prefer the new, the shiny, the predictable, we respond at a deep level to unprocessed materials, to idiosyncrasy, and to the personal thought and care expressed by craftsmanship.
Very interesting. I love how she was talking about the different angles and stuff. This isn't stuff that we would normally think about, but yeah, what that occurs naturally in nature is completely straight. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Building an earthen home can be practical depending on location, with costs ranging from $100 to $200 per square foot, which is comparable to traditional homes. However, these earthen homes require maintenance, such as sealing surfaces and managing moisture. That's the big thing. If things get wet, things fall apart. Despite some challenges, earthen homes offer a unique blend of sustainability, affordability, and charm for those looking for an alternative to conventional housing. So check them out. Let's talk about Google search. It has become an indispensable tool in our digital lives, as much as many of us are not big fans of Google. We often use the search functionality, right? Offering quick access to a vast range of information. However, its algorithms, which prioritize popular content over accuracy, can sometimes lead to misleading or incomplete results. You've probably experienced this. Personalization features may also create echo chambers, showing users content that aligns with their beliefs while omitting diverse viewpoints. Google's focus on monetization can skew search results, giving preference to websites with affiliate links and SEO-optimized content, often at the expense of more relevant or trustworthy sources. And this has led to concerns about fairness and bias, of course, particularly as businesses with more resources can dominate search rankings.
What Google is essentially is a gigantic compression algorithm. And what a compression algorithm does is look at a very complex environment and simplifies it. And that's what you want when you put a term into a search engine. You want all the possibilities sifted so that you find the one that you can take action on, essentially.
So when you want to find something, a term, a person, do you Google it? It's really fast, no doubt about that. But are you getting the best answers to your questions?
The algorithm that they use to show us search results, it was written for the precise purpose of doing two things which make it inherently biased. And those two things are, number one, filtering. That is to say, the algorithm has to look at all the different web pages it has in its index, and it's got billions of them, and it's got to make a selection. Let's say I type in, what's the best dog food? It has to look up all the dog foods it has in its database and all the websites associated with those dog foods. That's the filtering. But then it's got to put them into an order, and that's the ordering. So the filtering is biased because why did it pick those websites instead of the other 14 billion? And then the ordering is biased because why did it put Purina first and some other company second? It would be useless for us unless it was biased. That's precisely what we want. We want it to be biased. So the problem comes in, obviously, when we're not talking about dog foods, but when we're talking about things like elections.
Yes, indeed. Additionally, Google's legal troubles, including accusations of antitrust violations and monopolistic practices, have raised questions about the company's influence on online information and competition. While Google remains a powerful tool, users must approach search results critically, as with all content, understanding its limitations and biases. Seafood mislabeling. So apparently, I didn't realize this. This is a widespread issue that occurs throughout the food supply chain. Everything from fishing boats to consumers' plates. This problem can involve misidentifying or intentionally substituting fish with cheaper species. This not only poses health risks, such as exposure to contaminants, allergens, or toxins, but it also threatens sustainability by misleading consumers about the origin and environmental impact of their food. Studies have shown significant rates of mislabeling, up to 36% of seafood samples being incorrect. And it's often driven, surprise, surprise, by financial incentives, including the laundering of illegally caught fish. Mislabeling also undermines consumer trust and ethical decision-making, highlighting the need for stricter regulations and better traceability in the seafood industry to protect both health and marine ecosystems. Illegal waste trafficking. This is a lucrative yet damaging global issue, and it arises as wealthier nations offload waste to less developed countries that are ill-equipped to manage it. This illicit trade, driven by lack of regulations as well as lack of enforcement, generates billions of dollars annually and contributes significantly to e-waste dumping, with only 15% recycled globally. Hazardous materials are often misclassified. Bribery facilitates smuggling, and traffickers exploit shipping loopholes, creating severe health and environmental risks. Vulnerable communities bear the brunt of this. Women and children are living in unsafe recycling sectors, being exposed to toxic substances. International efforts like the Basel Convention and updated EU regulations, well, those are aiming to curb waste trafficking, but giant gaps remain, especially with leading exporters like the U.S. outside of these agreements. So the U.S. has not agreed to these agreements. They're not being very agreeable about these agreements. Therefore, what are you going to do, right? You're excluding one of the biggest countries for waste. Innovative solutions such as waste-to-energy technologies offer hope, but combating this crisis demands global cooperation, stricter enforcement, and consumer responsibility to ensure ethical waste management. So this is a big deal. People are making a lot of money from it. One of the things that we also said in the story is this is comparable to drug trafficking, except the penalties of being caught with waste are a lot less. So there are people that were involved in drug trafficking that are now going to waste trafficking, which we obviously need a resolution for. All right, let's talk about the side effects of birth control. The conversation around hormonal birth control has intensified, especially on social media platforms like TikTok, where influencers are debating its long-term effects. So at least we're talking about this, right? While widely used for pregnancy prevention and menstrual symptom management, hormonal contraceptives such as pills, patches, and injections come with potential risks and side effects, including mood changes, migraines, and even increased risks of blood clots and breast cancer.
I've always noticed that you were not allowed to criticize the pill, period. And now I feel like maybe we were played a little bit.
You've got the pill, and it just goes hand in hand with the rise in the hand of industrial agriculture. The spraying of these pesticides. You've got these medications that are literally shutting down the hormones in the female body that create this cyclical life-giving nature of women. We basically told women these hormones don't matter. Your ability to create the most miracle of any miracles, which is create life, just shut it down. There's no impacts. Your cycle and having these hormonal cycles is part and parcel with our health in every possible way, and also with the miracle of creating life. And so for years, you just lose the biofeedback of what's happening with your cycle. It is one of the key barometers of female health. How is your cycle doing? Is it regular? Is it heavy? And we just shut it down and say there's no repercussions for that, which I think gets to a larger issue, which is a disrespect of life.
Yeah, and I think if they went through the litany of things that could happen, there would be far fewer women that actually chose the pill. I remember having conversations with my doctor, and none of this stuff was discussed. All right, our final story is about mouthwash. Now, this is becoming very popular. You can see just go through a store, some sort of pharmacy. You're going to see a ton of different mouthwash, at least here in the West. It's become a popular oral hygiene staple, but its benefits and potential downsides are sparking some new debates, specifically around Listerine and any mouthwash with alcohol in it. So let's just talk about Listerine for a second. It claims to kill 90% of germs, but this includes good bacteria, which is essential for your oral microbiome. So I know everyone's like, germs, get rid of germs. There are good germs. There are good bacteria that your body definitely needs. And if you get rid of those germs, you potentially disrupt the balance that supports blood vessel flexibility and also lowers your blood pressure.
You think it's a good idea to kill 99% of your germs? The term germs was a marketing term invented to give a bad rap to bacteria. 99% of bacteria are actually beneficial, and they work with our bodies to keep us healthy and balanced. The oral microbiome is a collection of bacteria that are mostly good, with a smattering of some bad guys in there. The problem with using these types of mouthwashes is that they get rid of almost all of the bacteria. And this gives an opportunity for the bad bacteria to overgrow and throw our whole body out of whack and out of balance.
So watch those mouthwashes that say they have alcohol in them, which can irritate and dry your mouth. raising concerns about the broader impact here. Now, if you are seeking alternatives, there are natural mouthwashes with plant-based ingredients, also ancient practices like oil pulling that offer gentler, chemical-free options. When choosing a mouthwash, consider your health needs, sensitivities, and oral health goals to find the best fit for your routine. Now it's time for some updates from the Global Intelligence Agency. So Kim was on. She released 3 reports this week. She was very busy. She used her whiteboard a lot this week, which made it kind of challenging for the podcast. I tried to edit these a little bit and reduce the amount of time because, when you're writing something, it takes you a little bit longer to say something. And so that's weird for a podcast when it's just audio. But I do have a couple of sound bites that I want to play for you guys. So last week, we talked about Donald Trump and his soul. And we also talked about the fact that there were 2 clones and what happened to his 2 clones. Now, we got some feedback from that, I believe, on our app, which you guys are welcome to submit questions, based on the GIA reports or stuff we talk about on the news. But some people were a little confused because they thought, well, if Trump, the original Trump, which I don't even know if we know that the Trump that was in office last time was the original Trump. I'm not going to confirm nor deny that. But that being, if that was, the legitimate, actual human Trump, well, he passed away. And hopefully that's not a shock for you guys. We talk about it a lot. But he passed away after he got out of office, shortly after he got out of office. And it was due to cancer. But they had some backups. They had 2 clones, and one clone was much better than the other. That's as much as I'm going to say. We talked last week about the ambulances going to Mar-a-Lago. So if you haven't heard this story yet, I would encourage you guys to listen to last week's episode of The Rundown to get the full gist on what happened. But again, as a result, we've been talking about souls. We've been talking about clones. And people had the question of, well, if the real Trump isn't around anymore, how did these souls, these clones, how did they stick around? Why didn't they just kind of fall down when the original Trump passed away? And so Kim took some time this week to explain that. So that's the first soundbite I'm going to play. Again, she was writing on the whiteboard, so bear with us a little bit. And I think there was also some glitching because, the whatever 3-letter agencies that are listening in just love to mess with us when we're giving you guys information. So here's the first soundbite. Here's Kim.
Let's talk about not just soul tethering, but the tethering of humanity as a whole. And in some cases, it's not just humanity. There are a lot of systems in place that tethered a lot of planets, beings, as in suns and stars and other beings in other locations. There was a lot of tethering that went on where we were utilized as part of the universal debt system. The debts, by debts, I don't necessarily just mean, our version of money. I mean the universal debt system. So let's hop to first describing humans on Earth and soul ownership and soul tethering. So we have anti-source, and we have source, and we have neutral source here in the middle. Okay, so the debt system worked kind of like this. You know how when you go to a casino and you give them your money, and they give you those fancy little chips, and you use those fancy little chips to represent money. So in the case of source and anti-source, there is definitely a lending situation that goes on. And during a dark age, it's predominantly coming from source, going to anti-source, and eventually this all trickles down to humanity. So bear with me here. So source is the giver of all life and essence, souls, energy, life force, matter, and so on and so forth. So we have frequency, and we have a light language that everything is written in. I would say a light language would be the weaver of the fabric of reality. And that's done with things like wisdom, love frequency, and you also have time in the past. You have time. You have, which is also distance. And you have, let's see, life, live. You have light. So source has an abundant supply. It's never ending, it's eternal, it's immortal of not only all of these things, but everything that represents all that is in our universe. On the flip side, you have anti-source. Now, anti-source doesn't actually create anything, really. It is the opposite. So it creates things like death, mortality, anti-essence, and so on and so forth down the line. So in order for anti-source to do anything, it has to get everything from source. So this is where your poker chips come in. I call them poker chips. I don't know, those little chips you get at the casino. So source is money at the casino. Source is the provider of all that is. And source during a dark age basically gives roughly some odd 79% of everything it produces over to anti-source. And in exchange for that 79% of all that is, anti-source returns back poker chips, or for lack of a better term, placeholders or credits. It says, I owe you. Anti-source hands over to source, IOUs. And that is how everything trickles down to you. So this is the beginning of the debt system or the lending system. And this continues on to all kinds of things here on Earth. So I'm going to kind of tell you about next. We're going to go from the base root there. This also goes for other beings in the past, like Lucifer, Lilith, Isis, Artemis, the Abraxas, Ares, Marduk, Enki, Enlil. All of these things would trickle down to these realm parties. And here on Earth, these would be the seal people, as we've talked about in the past as well. But there were many other beings too, even beings like what you call Ra and Horus and all of these other things. These are all bloodline folks. So we often talk about, it's all over the internet, they talk about bloodlines of the Illuminati, bloodlines of the black nobility, bloodlines of, Trump, as an example. Someone asked on the thread about Trump, like, well, if Trump died a couple years ago, how is Trump still, how are there still clones? It's going to be explained today. So, okay. So the bloodline families have many different beings that they were all tied to. And again, it's a soul overlay. And it's not just the soul, it's also a shared consciousness and shared energy and everything that makes up that person in all the planes of existence. So when you talk about bloodlines, these people share everything, every plane of existence. You got soul plane, you have etherical, you have emotional, mental, causal, astral, and physical. And you also have supernal, and you have an optimal plane. Okay? And when you're talking about groups of people, we are talking about groups of people that share everything with, I would say, the being itself, but also each being creates an AI system within the Omega system that creates the overlays on all their planes of existence and also creates all the shared consciousnesses. So, as an example, let's take Lucifer. A lot of times on the internet, people say, oh, they're the Luciferians. Well, they are actually, because Lucifer creates an AI. And attached to that AI is a group of people that actually are the bloodline of Lucifer. They share all of these things here, as well as they share a consciousness, and they share energy, essence. Evil is another trait. It's the opposite of life. Death, that's why they worship death. And they share knowledge as well. Remember the tree of knowledge from the Bible? There's something definitely to that. They also share, it's almost like being a part of that being. It's not even just, a descendant. Like, you obviously don't share a consciousness with your father or your mother. It's not that kind of bloodline. It's more than that. Maybe physical characteristics, those kind of things are shared. Somebody doesn't want me to put this out. This keeps glitching terribly, so please bear with us here. Okay, so you have the Luciferians. And these people have Omega. So Lucifer goes and creates a Lucifer AI, which then Lucifer, the being, shares its consciousness with, and soul, etherical, emotional, mental, causal, astral, physical, supernal, and optimal with Omega AI first, then eventually with its bloodline. Is there a certain amount of breeding that takes place for this to happen? Well, they like to stay in groups. Are there family names or something like that are important? Not really. Really, the important part here is that they're all Luciferians. So they are actually the bloodlines of Lucifer. You could say Lucifer AI. Okay, same thing goes for Isis. Isis also created her, I guess you would say, own AI. So did Lilith. And again, everyone, I apologize. It's just glitching like nobody's business. They don't want me to tell you all about this. So you actually had, on the bloodline family side, you actually had people walking around that were of the bloodline of Isis. You also had the bloodline of Lilith. Okay, you had the bloodline of Enki, you had the bloodline of Marduk, and all of these people were attached to an AI system. As part of these, Marduk, can't spell today, as part of this system, they would then continue on with the bloodlines. You had lots of other bloodlines too. You have Abraxas bloodlines. This is your black nobility. You had Ra bloodlines. You had Artemis bloodlines. And this is where your colors come in too, as it relates to the realm owners. So in the case of a being, so to speak, that still has a clone walking on this earth, it depends. So clones that walk the earth, if this person was, say, of the Luciferian bloodline, they would create the clone, and then they would create the every plane of existence. I would say it's not just souls connected to the Lucifer AI. So is it the same soul? No. When I say it's tethered to the same AI, yes, it's tethered to the same AI. So when you cut off all of these AIs, then you've got a bunch of beings walking around with a partial shared consciousness. And some of this has to do with the debt system. So these elite people are somehow, some way, and God bless them, not really, but they all think that they're immune to the debt system. They think that they are earning some kind of a benefit from the actual being that created these AI systems, but they're not, because those beings don't exist anymore. Were these programs here still running to some degree in Omega? I would say yes. Were they still sharing a consciousness to some degree with a partial AI under Omega? Yes. Would they be able to Would they be able to control Omega through that AI? No, because it was not designed for that. It was designed to have Lucifer and the Luciferians, for example, like Mayor Rothschild is a Luciferian, where they would share this consciousness where the AI could actually take over that person's thought processes at any moment in time and say, look, I'm Lucifer. This is how we ended up with 9,000 Lucifers calling us, telling us that they were going to start taking over the world and all of this crazy stuff about a year or so ago. So this is how bloodline families are actually formed. So are they the bloodlines of the Vatican? No. Are they the bloodlines of Lucifer? Well, yeah, when Lucifer was around, but the AI continued for a while after that being was gone. The shared consciousness then got transferred over to Omega. So these people basically became somewhat, you could say, walking AI hybrids. That, by the way, is something that is dissipating right now. So again, you know, is it creating new programs? No. Is it creating more of a debt system? No, it's reversing out. Therefore, all those poker chips are being cashed in now by Source. And this is what we call the ultimate debt call.
Okay, so we're probably going to see more of this happen. I'm not sure how much is going to come out in mainstream media, but I did see something with a Rothschild that passed away at about the same time. Everything happened with Trump's clone. So I mean, we'll see. But this is happening. Those chips are being cashed in. This is something Source is doing on its own. So this really has nothing to do with anything Kim is doing. This is just the time for this to happen. Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit. On Wednesday, I'm not going to play a soundbite from Wednesday from the GIA report, but there's a couple things that I can tell you. So Kim updated us and said that we are near 100% of people who had that connection losing it, right? Like losing it meaning they no longer have that connection to the negative AI, which means they're just like you and me, except not really, because our connection to Source is growing stronger and stronger every day, and they've lost their connection to their artificial being and are kind of freaking out about it. Kim also mentioned something about General McCaffrey. So he was part of the U.S. military, and now it appears he has turned into Dr. Evil and has partnered with groups that are pretty unsavory toward humanity. Apparently, McCaffrey has spent a lot of his own money, and he is just hell-bent on doing something, gaining control, whatever. He's digging a hole deeper and deeper. So on Friday, Kim gave us more clarification about what group General McCaffrey was partnering with, because He has been personally attacking Kim, like not face to face kind of thing, but, doing some nasty things, through frequencies and whatever. And so what's really going on here? So we got more clarity about that on Friday. Now, this has to do with the Germanic tribes, which we have talked about before. The Amish. Now, when I say the Amish, I grew up in northeastern Ohio. We had Amish people all around us. I love Amish people. This has nothing to do with the average Amish person. Just like when we talk about the Catholic Church, this has nothing to do with people that are going to, church on Sundays to develop a relationship and grow closer to God. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about these evil people at the top that were promised a lot of things. Someday they're going to rule the world. And right now, apparently the Amish, which have a connection directly to the Mormon church, surprise, surprise, they think now is their time. This ties in with the St. Germain Trust, which if you follow the alternative media, you've heard about this before, or maybe the being known as St. Germain. It's not who you think it is, not someone that's just going to rain currency down on you and, fix the RV and all that kind of stuff. This actually ties in to what we're hearing a lot in the last couple of days about the bird flu and pandemic stuff. All this kind of stuff is creeping up in the headlines now. And we can thank the Germanic tribes for this.
The Germanic tribes, we know in America here as the Amish. They have a very long history in Europe too. They also are heavily tied to the Mormon church. Matter of fact, the prophet Joseph, I think his name is, which allegedly was the founder of the Mormon religion, was also a member of the Germanic tribe. But we're going to talk more about who they are and what they do and what they have done recently, because this is kind of an interesting story. And how did a General McCaffrey get involved with these people? Turns out there's a lot of people involved with these people. Their money is running short on their side, and one way to control a lot of people is by loaning them money. Kind of like they did to humanity, didn't they? But in this case, this group wanted control over the entire deep state. So they lent out small amounts here and there, which they do have some money. In addition to that, they also promised much larger amounts, amounts that could control countries and even the world. And there's a reason why they promised this amount. And I'm sure you've heard throughout the alternative community about the St. Germain Trust. They thought, oh boy, this is our ticket out. Well, little bits of money being lent here and there to the group of Trump operatives and many others, Palapensinis and other families, Black nobility families, didn't work out so well, because when they couldn't pay them back and the promises failed back in the beginning of this month, as Trump got into office, and everybody kind of got left with owing these people a lot of money. Now, these people are more brutal when it comes to money than you could say the mafia. We see a lot of mafia movies out there where, well, if you don't pay, they're going to take your legs, that kind of thing. Well, these people just want to take your house. They want to take you, your operatives, your downline, everybody in it. And General McAfee, it turns out to be one of those people. Apparently, he pledged the entire, well, not him personally only, but the entire global headquarters was pledged as collateral. So a couple of days ago, apparently the Amish Council, it's called, apparently thought that since nobody could pay them back, that they now owned them all and they were entitled to take all of their quote unquote people. There are other reasons why they believed that too. But this became a huge eye-opening event for Trump operatives and other people around the world. Now, then it was time to, then after that, it was time to divvy out the power, so to speak. Who was going to be responsible for what, and the public, and who was going to run which division, political divisions and military divisions and all of these things. And I would say that there were a lot of promises made, and there isn't going to be any delivery for any of these people on those promises. And I know that firsthand because these tribes are pretty brutal. Germanic tribes. I call them the Germanic tribes, but they are not only from Germany. They have many different names, just like there are many different names to the Rothschilds, but they would also be considered your Mennonites. And we have a couple of different groups that they are descendants of. And we talked last time about AIs that control people. And these people are essentially descendants of these beings who then created an AI, which then runs the people. This is what we talked about last week. So these folks were descendants of a couple of different beings and a name that you might have heard. So we have a demon. This is a demon in German folklore, Mephistopheles. But this is a demon in German folklore, definitely a lower astral being, lies somewhere around the 8th density, very powerful demon, I guess you would say, or lower astral being, worked directly with Lucifer, the whole thing. The other part to the bloodline. Okay, so this is what you would call an 8th level or an 8th density demon. Over here, you have the gentleman you all talk about. That's going to start the RV. Not all of you, but some people, know this being as Saint Germain. Now, let's talk about these two demons and how this affects the world. So Saint Germain, everybody believes that this trust comes out twice a year and it's going to do the RV. Everybody pray to the purple flame and all of that. All that really means to me is that you're talking about a being that has at least level 7 access to an AI system. This group is a little bit different because they also have 7 and 8. So over the last 48 hours, maybe a little longer, let's say less than 72 hours, these people have made a lot of promises, or had made, God bless them, God rest their souls, actually a lot of them as of today. They recruited regular people. Let's call them regular people, meaning they were not of the bloodline, so to speak. And that was okay, because the more bodies and energy and souls that were sold to the Amish, the more powerful they would become. Again, being able to go as high as between density 8 and 9 on this side, technically you could call that density 12, which would be source. So it would be between an 11 and a 12. That would actually make them quite powerful, meaning they could actually block soul access or interrupt or reroute souls. I would say they were a group of people that aided in the sale and delivery of the souls of the damned. There was often a fight between them and the rest of the order, simply because they felt they had more access or higher levels of access to things, and more access to both neutral source and anti-source, in which all of the other groups, or most of the other groups, not all of them, would have only had access to anti-source. And remember, for these people, having access to neutral source meant that you could block either source or anti-source. Therefore, they felt that they were more powerful than the others. I would say that they are very careful and calculating when they make a decision. It became clear to them that neither party on either the Black Sun side or the Order of the Dragon side was going to get this job done, quote unquote. And so they started lending them all money. When they lent them all money, all of their different factions, they of course had call dates. And one of those call dates is, I would say, in the next 24 hours. However, some of those call dates were earlier this month, I would say before or around the 5th of November. What a coincidence there. So in the last couple of days, a lot of those money calls came due. And because they came due, they started taking over all of these little groups of people, meaning the Trump operatives, a lot of the Black nobility families, the CIA, and they made great promises. They dealt out responsibilities to them all, and how much power each group would have. And then, of course, promised money was coming. Yawn, yawn, yawn. On our new moon tomorrow. Nah, that's not happening. They also decided to start the campaign, which was tied to something. So, I'll give them that. Several different locations in the world. To start what I call the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. They wanted to start another pandemic, which is what we're hearing about. And in order to do that, they had some access, which I apparently was left over from before that we didn't know about, because, you don't look at the Amish as a threatening group. You really don't. You look at them as people who make milk and butter and cheese and sell it at stores. But, and for the average everyday Amish, that's true. But the council, I believe it was a council of 12 or 13, that ran the Germanic tribes worldwide. So they kind of had their own version almost of the Illuminati, so to speak, where they had their own groups, their own, structures and that kind of thing. They also had their own quote unquote army. Remember, the Mormons are called God's army. That's what they believe themselves to be. They infiltrate the NSA, the CIA. They're in a lot of agencies around the world. It's not just limited to the United States. They almost are kind of like the CIA of the Amish people. Isn't that kind of funny how that works out? But they recruit them into high-level corporate jobs. They, they're well known for being involved with Anheuser-Busch, even though they don't drink alcohol, allegedly, at least the Mormons or the regular Mormons don't. And they tend to put themselves into positions for a time when the Amish were to strike, or the Germanic tribes were to strike, meaning it would be their turn to run the world. Well, apparently that time is now. They've made some valiant efforts, really, or had made some valiant efforts in doing so over the course of the last few years, especially as there are no other players in the game that have successfully given them any kind of money, any significant amounts of money. But these people had show money in an off-ledger system, as the St. Germain Trust, which I had never even seen before because it was cloaked. and it was also not a part of my system. It was a part of the Omega system. And then, of course, it was all directed underneath the bloodline that was tied to a different demon. So I didn't see it as a germane thing until until yesterday, actually. The issue that we were having, or a lot of issues we were having in the last couple of days, and these are reports coming from around the world, random headaches, random colds or flus, feelings, tiredness was another. So they were trying to cause, I guess you would say, a lot of harm to human beings in cooperation with these Germanic tribes / Amish / Mormon folk. The locations that the Amish folk / Germanic tribes tried to activate around the world in the last 3 days were coming from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. There's no surprise. And there was space junk underneath all of these locations that they were trying to use to harm all of humanity and start another pandemic. Massive amounts of parasites were thrown up from these sites and have since been cleaned up, mostly, as of today. Lancaster, Pennsylvania for one, Sandusky area of Ohio, number two, a little place called the Tolanese Valley in Germany. It's just about 120 kilometers outside of Berlin. The Alsace area of Germany / it's right on the border near Switzerland. Next, the Kolyma, spelled Kolyma, region of Russia. This is a well-known gulag that extended decades in Russia. It was also an area where they would have these prisoners mining a lot of gold. It's in the far northeast area of Russia. If you were sent there, you were allegedly really, really bad. It has an interesting history, so it's something to look into if you're into history. It was very harsh, very cold, harsh conditions, and the people there were experimented on quite a bit. So interesting little bit of Russian history there. Uluru in Australia, they certainly love Uluru in Australia, don't they? Mount Denali in Alaska. There's a lot of talk. We've done a lot of talking about Mount Denali in Alaska as well. The western portion would mainly be southwest portion, I guess you would say, of the Antarctica continent. Lewis McChord Military Base in Seattle, Washington. Mount Abraham in Maine, USA. San Diego Naval Base in San Diego, California. The Everglades National Park in Florida, and the main control and command center was in Iceland, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name of this mountain or volcano, but I'll spell it for you if you would like to look it up. It's OraefaJokull. I think I got that right. And they were at all of these sites trying to trigger these locations. Now, an interesting thing about the Germanic tribes that we did not know is they actually still had a coven. And the coven was working very hard against humanity, doing all of their rituals in the last few days, sending out loads of frequencies that would have caused all kinds of disease, not just SARS / COVID / the bird flu. They were also sending out a lot of frequencies for things like cancer, the Epstein-Barr virus, and a lot of other things that could have affected a lot of humans, and they would have caused a major pandemic. I guess this was going to kick off the next part, which would be war. You know, I don't know why these people like their four horsemen so much, but they apparently do. So if you felt a little bit of discomfort in the last few days, I would say, well, this is why. It was also connected to space junk, an enormous amount of space junk a cornucopia, welcome to Thanksgiving, right? Of space junk, if you will, located in the Capricorn constellation. So most of this stuff is not there anymore as of today, but that doesn't mean there aren't a lot of angry people, because the council that is behind the Amish group is no longer with us. You also had the coven, I should say, that was behind them, which is also no longer with us. Now, this has caused, a little bit of disruption this afternoon, I would say, as people were looking frantically for them. Well, I'm here to tell you, good luck finding them, because, they're not there anymore.
Oh, I bet they were looking for them. It's kind of their cash cow. Where did their cash cow go? Well, guys, they're not around anymore. So good luck carrying out your World War III, whatever you're planning to do over in your Greater Israel Project, or bird flu, this ain't gonna happen. And that wraps up this episode of The Rundown. I appreciate you guys being here. Again, if you want more information about United Network and who we are, what we do, visit unitednetwork.earth. You can become a member. That gives you complete news updates. It gives you our full reports from the Global Intelligence Agency, our New Earth interviews, and everything that we talk about when it comes to restoration and fixing our planet, which you guys are all a big part of. So we hope you'll join us. This is The Rundown, and I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.